Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for the Canadian Foodgrains Bank spring meeting in this area. Those of you who aren't familiar with Stone United Church, this is it'll be our sixth year of running a food grain project. Prior to that, actually, I was involved for 20 years in another church, so I'm quite familiar with Foodgrains and the important work that they do. So welcome to Stone United Church. We're very pleased that you could join us this morning. I'll turn it over to Henry Renders, who is our area coordinator, and worked with Henry for quite a number of years, and could join us this morning, as well as Julie.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And a real pleasure to be here with you folks this morning. This is our 6th of 10 meetings that we're running across the province, so I kind of think I know what we're doing, but there's still always glitches. So but it's really fun to be here, and thank you all for coming. One of the major purposes of these meetings is just to simply say thank you to you for your support of the Foodgrains Bank and the work that we do, because the work that we do couldn't be done with folks like you who are supporting us at the other end, allowing us to get those donations to do the work that we do. And we want to talk to you a little bit today about some of the work that we do and how that's impacting people, but also give you a flavor for what your work is doing here and how that's making a difference in the lives of people around the world. And so that's what we're here to do today, and I'm pleased to have Julie Dirksen with me. Julie is our supporter relations manager, all the way from Winnipeg. Even brought some good weather with her.
That's right, it goes this way.
Right, so we'll be hearing from Julie a little bit later as to some of the experiences that she's had overseas. One thing about the Foodgrains Bank is that we try to get all of our employees to go on at least one trip overseas to see the work that we do, and it gives everybody a good flavor for how our programs are working and the difference that they're making. So with that, I want to start first of all with a little devotion, and I'm going to do this too. We do like to have the names of people who were at these meetings just for our record, so I'm going to pass around a registration sheet. If you could just put your name, address, your email address if you have one. I do send out an email newsletter once a month. So the last column says newsletter. If you want to get that and you have an email, just put a yes in that column. If you don't want to get it, I won't be insulted if you don't put anything in there, if you put in no or no way, no. Because I know people get lots of emails, so if you would like to be kept up to date on what's going on in Ontario, and highlight some of the things that are going on with the Foodgrains Bank as well, just put a yes in that. If you're not already getting it, I know some of you are already getting it. So I'll pass this around. Okay. Yeah. So I'd like to start off first of all, being that one of the things that we like to start off with is a land acknowledgement. It comes back to all the work that's been done relating to the Indigenous peoples and where we stand with them. So this is the land acknowledgement that we actually used in our 40th anniversary events, if anybody was at those, so you may have heard this before. But starting off with our head office of the Foodgrains Bank, it's located on the homelands of the Cree, Anishinaabe, and Métis nations. Our work across Canada takes place on homelands of other nations, including the Algonquin, Blackfoot, Assiniboine, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Mi'kmaq, Malisite, Salish, Say-Elks, Okanagan, and Secwepemc nations. The descendants of these people live across Canada. They are our friends and neighbors, and we acknowledge that it is within their territories that our work takes place. We honor them as current hosts and original trustees of this land. May we abide by the treaties made with these nations, and may we live well in the land together. We are a Christian response to hunger, and of course are made up of 15 Canadian churches and church agencies. And so I want to start this meeting with a little devotion. And this is a devotion based on the verses 15 to 17 out of the Gospel of John, chapter 21, where it's the story of Jesus reinstating Peter. So hear these words from the Bible. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Why do we take the issue of world hunger so seriously at Canadian Foodgrains Bank? The answer is found throughout various passages in the Bible. We all know the parable of Jesus feeding the 5,000. The parable of the sower talks about growing more food in good soil. In Isaiah 58:10, we read, "If you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday." But for me, it's Jesus' words to Peter in the passage we just read, "Feed my sheep." 3 simple words repeated 3 times. Of course, there is much more depth and meaning to these words than simply bringing food to people. 3 times Jesus asks Peter if he loves him, and after each affirmative response from Peter, Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." This is a direct correlation to the 3 times Peter denied Jesus before he went to the cross. This is Jesus' way of clearing the air between Peter and himself. He wants Peter to know that he is forgiven, and that he has a place and a role in God's kingdom on earth. And by extension, Jesus wants us to know that we are forgiven, and that we have a place and a role in God's kingdom. And through his command to feed his sheep, Jesus gives us insight as to what we are to do for those who proclaim to love him. He calls for action to accompany our faith, giving meaning and purpose to our Christian lives. Feeding God's people is how we put our faith into action. Yes, of course, Jesus is telling Peter and the rest of the disciples, and us, to nurture and grow the faith in the church, to spread the word of his gospel. But before that can be done, before people can be fed spiritually, people must be fed physically, because until people have their physical needs met, not much of anything else really matters to them. It is one of the principles of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So those 3 simple words have meaning at many different levels, but at the very basic level, God is asking us to feed the hungry, for that is the very basis of life. We have a daunting task ahead of us. It can be discouraging to think of the millions who are hungry, starving, or even dying. But as we look into the face of every single person we help, we are looking into the face of God, for we are created in his image. That smile that comes across that face is a smile from God. A smile that encourages us and drives us to continue this work. I want to close with a quote from Mother Teresa, whose house of worship I was so privileged to visit when I was in India. These are her thoughts on helping the millions of people in the world from a book entitled Words to Love by Mother Teresa. "I never look at the masses as my responsibility. I look at the individual. I can love only one person at a time, and I can feed only one person at a time. Just one. You get closer to Christ by coming closer to each other. As Jesus said, whatever you do to the least of my brethren, you do to me. I picked up one person. Maybe if I didn't pick up that one person, I wouldn't have picked up 42,000. The whole work is only a drop in the ocean, but if I didn't put the drop in, the ocean would be one drop less. Same thing for you. Same thing in your church family. Same thing in the church where you go. Just begin. One. And so it is at Canadian Foodgrains Bank. We work one person at a time, saving lives, bringing hope, and creating food security. Let's pray. O Lord, our Savior and Redeemer, gratitude for the blessings you have provided. Homes and families is well beyond what most people in the world have. would not be so without your divine presence. For we also recognize that you have come around the world. You if we spend ourselves on behalf of the hungry. You have told us to feed your sheep. Help us to be your servants in helping others. Help us to meet the needs of so many who are facing hunger. Help us to see your face in these children of yours. Help us to reach out and save lives. We pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So if we can get it going, I have a neat hymn here that I think really wraps this up, what I've just talked about, called Brother, Sister, Let Me Serve You. And you're welcome to sing along.
Brother, sister, let me serve you. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. We are pilgrims on a journey, we're companions on the road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load.
I will hold the Christ light for you in the night time of your fear. I will hold my hand out to you, speak a peace you long to
I will weep when you are weeping. When you laugh, I'll laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we've seen this journey through. When we sing to God in heaven, we shall find such harmony. For of all we've known together, of Christ's love and agony. Brother, sister, let me serve you. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too.
Thank you. You guys are great singers. Okay, I want to spend a few minutes now talking about some of the work at Canadian Foodgrains Bank. What I'm going to be covering, the first part there is a quick financial update on where we are as the Foodgrains Bank this year. We'll talk a little bit about the quilt raffle that we've got ongoing. The quilt's back in the back room where we're having some refreshments afterwards. An update on Gaza, which is top of the mind of many people today with things going on there. And then we'll talk lastly about our new Nature Plus program, which is just underway now. A new venture of the Foodgrains Bank in association with support from the Canadian government. Then our guest speaker is Julie Dirksen. Julie is our supporter. Supporter relations manager. And like I did with Maya, I'll let you talk more about who you are and what you do, because what I come out of my mouth may not be.
Yeah, I
Right.
could supply lots of things, Henry.
Yes, I'm sure. So Julie's going to be talking a little bit about who we are and some stories about Kenya and also about advocating for the Foodgrains Bank. And then we'll have an update from growing projects, and I know Bill is going to talk a little bit about his experience going to Malawi, so I'm looking forward to hearing that as well. I have a little written report from you, but I'm looking forward to what you have to say, so that'll be great. And then we'll wrap it up at the end. Now we're on a bit of a timeline here because we have to be in Dunnville at 2 o'clock, and that's about an hour and a half drive, so we'll motor through this as best we can. I'm warning you, Julie.
Yeah, I'm gonna be fast.
Okay, so the Foodgrains Bank, everybody knows that our mission is that to end global hunger, and our vision is to have a world without hunger. And in our last fiscal year, we did $79.8 million of assistance for over 1.1 million people in 36 countries. We have been really blessed with the Foodgrains Bank throughout the pandemic, where we have seen our donations significantly increase. When I first started in 2020 with the Foodgrains Bank, we were taking in about $12.5 million, and last year was a record year for us when we took in $21.6 million. And it's been amazing and phenomenal to see the support that's come in from Canadians recognizing the needs of others. And so that leads me into talking about our financial update, where we are currently. And this is our donations by province. And if you look at the bottom line, I'm not sure if it's quite big enough there, but you can see that our total, this is for 11 months, our fiscal year end is March the 31st, so it's just less than a week away. So our total to the end of February was $18.2 million that we have taken in this year versus $20.4 million last year. So it's down a little. It's down probably because we're not seeing the donation coming in as strong. People in the pandemic years had extra income because they weren't able to spend it, they weren't traveling, etc. So that's part of the reason. But I think a bigger part of the reason that we're seeing it down this year is in effect from the growing projects. And if you look at our growing project income, again to the end of February this year versus the end of February last year, you can see the total at the bottom. We're down about $1.4 million in growing project income. And that's not a surprise to those of you who are in the farming community, because you know that crop prices have deteriorated quite significantly over the last 6 months or even the last year or so. So the level of income that's coming in, even though the yields might be there, the level of income because of the lower prices is not the same. Speaking of yields, in the western provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan in particular, they had some really, really dry months where the crops didn't yield very well. And so that impacted the amount of donations coming in from those projects. The one story I have for you comes from a growing project in Alberta where they planted their crop and they were driven because they said, we planted the crop, God grew the crop, we're going to go and harvest the crop. And so they did go and harvest the crop, but they got 4 bushels per acre. Now 4 bushels per acre, you and I would look at that and say, we're not even bothering going out there with the combine, right? But they did do that, and so they got a little bit of income. But the thing about the projects out in Alberta is that they're bigger, and these become community events where it's not only just a harvest day that's going on, people gather together, and so it's an event for them when they have the harvest day. So I think they wanted to carry on with that in part because of that. But those kind of yields, the lower prices, we're down $1.4 million, so that's a big part of that shortfall we're facing. The good news, though, on the other side of this is that we have to budget every year for what we think our income is going to be. And so we actually budgeted for $18 million, and I'm going to go back to the previous slide. So we budgeted for $18 million. We're at 18.2 to the end of February, and Julie was just telling me we're about 18.8 now. So we're well above what we had budgeted, which is the good news. And hopefully, we'll see this kind of growth continue from this level in future years. We're always trying to. We know that the pandemic led to an anomaly to increasing donations, and we were expecting some kind of a shorter shortfall of things happening. So that's where we are financially. I got asked, sometimes people look at that and they say, okay, you did $80 million of assistance and you've got $21 million here. Where does the rest of it come from? Well, a lot of it comes from the Canadian government. We had the $25 million matching grant that they provide for us every year. That's the 4-to-1 match, up to a maximum of $25 million. We have other funding that they supply us with, and Nature Plus will be one of those that I'm going to talk about. It's not impacting the numbers for this year, but it will impact the numbers for future years. And or maybe it did impact the numbers for this year. It started in March 2023. So, but then the other thing is, what people don't realize is that we are made up of 15 members, and many of those members transfer funds from their organizations, they're called member transfers, into the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. So that's how we end up programming almost $80 million from all those other sources as well. So switching gears now and talk quickly about our quilt raffle. We have a lady in the Strathroy area who makes these quilts, or has been making quilts, and she said, it's time for me to start divesting of some of these, so do you want one to raffle off? We did have a quilt raffle 6 years ago for our 35th anniversary that was quite successful. So we said, sure, why not? So we have this quilt. This is the picture of the quilt here. You can see it on there. The quilt is actually out displayed in part out in the back room there. And we're selling tickets on that, 1 for 10 and 3 for 20. You can join us back for the refreshments afterwards and buy some tickets if you'd like. And the draw for that will be November the 23rd. So it's a little ways away, but it'll make somebody a nice Christmas present. Right, Lauren? That's great. So just letting you know that that's on. And we have been selling tickets at the farm shows that I've been at in the month of March, and we'll be selling tickets again at other events and the farm shows in the month of September as well. So we're looking forward to making some, and I think we've sold over 300 tickets so far, so it's going fairly well. Okay, something a little bit more serious now, the Gaza situation, and where are we in Gaza, what's going on there. Gaza is, well, the word to use there is catastrophic. There have been over 32,000 people killed so far. There have been over 74,000 people that have been injured. 17,000 children have been separated from their parents. So that's 17,000 kids who don't know where their parents are, and the parents don't know where they are. And over 50,000 kids are acutely malnourished at this point. 60% of the housing has been damaged or destroyed, so when this conflict ends, there will be very little for people to go back to, because it's been such a devastating situation. So we talk about the situation being certainly catastrophic. And to put that into perspective, wrong one, with world events, I put up this, what's called this International Phase Classification of Hunger Level. So don't worry about the wording on the panel to the right there, just look at those colors. And the green, so there are 5 levels of hunger that we talk about when it talks to phase classification of hunger. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are minimal and stress situations. Basically what we have here in North America. Most people have enough food, there's no issues with hunger. Phase 2 is when you're starting to get into using food banks and that type of thing. There's still resources available that people can get the food they need. Phase 3, the orange block, is where Foodgrains Bank programming starts to kick in. That's where we start to work at those levels. And Phase 3 is people are now short on food, they're skipping meals because they don't have the food there. And we describe that as a crisis situation. Phase 4, an emergency situation, not only are they skipping meals, not maybe 1 or 2 a day, and maybe that they're skipping meals for a day or for 2 days in a row, but they're also selling off their possessions. All those things that they use to make their livelihood. Imagine if you're a carpenter and you're selling off your tools because you have to buy, you get the money to buy the food. If things recover, what have you got to go back to start your business again? You have to start all over. So they're selling their possessions, they're selling anything they can to have the money to buy the food they need. And in Phase 5, they simply have no food, they have no possessions left to sell. They're basically in a catastrophic situation where they have nothing to provide food for themselves. And so the Gaza situation is historically unprecedented for the work that we have done. Every single person in Gaza, and that's 2.2 million people, is at a Phase 3 or worse level. To my knowledge, from what I've heard, is we have never experienced that in any country where everybody is Phase 3 or worse. We talked about Somalia last year and how desperate the situation was there, and it was bad. But again, it's not a situation where the whole population was at Phase 3. Again, referring to Somalia, we talked about 10% of the population being in a Phase 5 catastrophic situation where they were just on the verge of famine. When I presented it, and then this slide has changed several times, some of these slides have changed several times in my presentations. 2 days ago, that number where it says 50% of IPC5 was 26%. So in the last 2 weeks, we have seen the number of people that are facing starvation jump from 26% of the population to 50%. 1.1 million people in Gaza are now in a situation where they're facing starvation. Like I said, that's something that we have never covered before, that we've never seen that's been that catastrophic. So what are we doing? We do have a response. We do have members that are programming in Gaza. You'll recall probably last year in November that we had a drive through the Humanitarian Coalition, of which the Canadian Foodgrains Bank is a member, to raise funds for the situation in Gaza. There were funds raised, and those funds have been channeled through 2 of our members. MCC is the Midnight Center Committee, and DNP is Development and Peace, who's the mission arm of the Catholic Church. And those 2 organizations, those 2 members of ours, are programming this food as best they can into Jordan. Food has been secured, or into Gaza, sorry. Food has been secured from Jordan, and we have enough set up there to program to feed 21,000 people. Yes, it's a small drop in the bucket compared to 2.2 million, but remember there are other organizations that are doing this work as well. In fact, there's enough food around the outside of Gaza waiting to get in to feed everybody. The difficulty is getting it in. And when we were talking about this a week ago, we were saying that we had the food in the warehouse, but we couldn't even do anything with it because there were no trucks to put it on. They were all loaded and waiting to get into Gaza. That situation has improved somewhat, and now we do have trucks through the Mennonite Central Committee that is bringing the food into Gaza, but it's slow and it's just a trickle, and we really, really need to see a ceasefire take place there so that we can make a significant difference in a quick amount of time. Food is there, we just need those borders to be opened up. The thing is, we need to remain flexible. The situation changes almost daily. You can have a program planned, and within hours that can change because of the conflict that's going on there. And so we're working as best we can through our partners. And the other thing is, remember that our partner staff, who are the people that are living in Gaza, that are implementing these programs, were there well before the war ever started. They're in the same position as the rest of the population. Their homes have been destroyed, their businesses, their offices have been destroyed. And so it's very difficult for them to also implement these programs with everything that's going on. So it is a very desperate situation. We're doing the best we can, and we ask people to simply, we need people to pray for peace. Yeah, Lauren, thanks.
Yeah, Henry was asked Sunday, by an individual, who's stopping the trucks? Is it Israel going borders, or is it the Gaza side?
I don't know that for sure. I think it's Israel, but I don't know that for sure.
That was my response, but I wasn't sure.
We have heard anecdotally, because they have to go through every shipment, so seen something where there's a medical scissors, a child's medical scissors in, they won't just take the scissors out, then that whole shipment is not allowed in. So the challenge of getting through the inspection process, I think for a lot of the different types of aid that's going in, is challenging, because you have different partners with different materials.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Any more questions on Gaza? Okay. Wrong button again. So Nature Plus, a little bit of a happier story. Nature Plus is a new program that the Foodgrains Bank is embarking on. It's actually with a great deal of support from the Government of Canada, it goes through Global Affairs Canada. But this is a program designed to help build better food systems in environmentally challenged landscapes. So what does that mean? Well, we'll talk a little bit first about the key points about the Nature Plus program. It's being operated in 4 countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. So these are the sub-Saharan countries in Africa. The initial phase of this program is a 3-year program. It started back in March of 2023, so 1 year is pretty well been completed now. It wasn't really officially announced until late last fall, but it has been started initially before that. So this initial phase involves $35.5 million of support from the Canadian government, from Global Affairs Canada, and the requirement on our part is to add an additional $1.67 million that we need to fundraise to make this program complete. And that's really not going to be a significant issue for us. We see funding already coming in, and if people want to donate to that, they simply have to write on their check or whatever for Nature Plus. and it will be designated that way. It is 9 of our 15 members that are working with 13 partners. We have 15 members, as I mentioned earlier, so 9 of those folks are working with 13 partners overseas. And we talk about this in terms of, we use the term nature-based solutions. And I have a video at the end of this that Andy Harrington speaks about nature-based solutions and what's being involved. But those are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore the ecosystem. So what we're dealing with here is countrysides where the forests have been removed, deforestation has occurred, the land has been overgrazed, has been overused, and there's erosion occurring, and so it's basically unproductive land at this point that we're trying to restore through some of these programs, through using nature-based solutions, to restore it to usable, productive land that people can then, within their communities, be able to feed themselves. So we're also addressing societal challenges, the big thing there being gender equality. As you're probably aware, much of the work that goes on in these countries is done by women. Women do the farm work, they do the labor, they do the housekeeping, they do the cooking, they do everything, and the men are not as involved in that, simply because that's the way the society is built there. And so we're working with those communities to help try and change some of that and get the men more involved and more on board. And those changes have made a difference. Maya, who was our guest speaker yesterday, had a quick video where showing a woman who, in some of these communities not involved with this program, but we do this in many other programs, where the woman was saying, you know, I now have my husband helping me a whole lot more because of the things that he's learned and because of the conservation ag training that she took, which allowed her to improve the production on her piece of land. So this gender challenges, we're overcoming that. It's not a quick thing, but it's certainly happening, and it's making a bit of a difference. So when I talk about this Nature Plus program, and you'll see this in the video from Andy, we're looking at some landscapes that have been really eroded and degraded, and our aim is to return some of those landscapes to useful production. This is an exciting new way of working for the Foodgrains Bank Network. Typically, we've done food assistance programs, where we're providing food to people who have no food. We're doing long-term response programs, where people are being trained to improve their production, and those are normally doing 2 separate programs. This is taking those 2 parts of the programs, putting them together, as well as trying to address some of the climate-based issues that have resulted in these degraded landscapes. So it really is a new way of working for us. It's long-term solutions addressing hunger and poverty alongside climate change resilience, and we're really learning as we go. So this is going to be a new direction for the Foodgrains Bank and some of the work that we do. And we'll see over the next 3 years where it leads us and where we take it from there. The thing about this, 3 years is an initial phase of the program. These are 15 to 20 year long-term response programs that it's going to take that long to return some of these landscapes to useful production.
Hi, I'm Andy Harrington of the Canadian Foodgrains Bank, and I'm here in the Afro-Montan region of southern Ethiopia. This is one of the areas where we're wanting to start a project that involves something called nature-based solutions. It's actually going to be an international project working here in Ethiopia, in Kenya, and in a trans-border region of Zimbabwe and Mozambique. So what's nature-based solutions? Well, as you can see, we're in a place where the land has been badly eroded. It may look quite beautiful, it may look a bit like the Grand Canyon, but this is not good for the people of this area because this erosion is continuing. It's continuing because of the deforestation that's happened in those mountains that's really allowing the water to run down very, very fast. It's continuing because of overgrazing of the land and overuse of its natural resources. So here in this part of the project, we're going to be looking at building climate resilient food systems that improve food security by really looking at changing this whole landscape using nature. Now this is a landscape level project over a huge area. It's a massive undertaking, but ending global hunger is a massive undertaking as well, and we have to have a big vision to do that. In order to make this project work, it's going to take all of us. We're going to be working with a number of our members across international boundaries, and through them with their local partners who really make things happen because they understand the local community and they understand what's needed.
So that's our Nature Plus program, and that concludes what I was going to talk about. Does anybody have any questions about any of that?
And are they just going to plant forestation, or they're trying to regain some agriculture?
Well, they're trying to regain agricultural land, and some of the planting that will be done will probably be more like productive trees, fruit trees, or something that'll allow them to have additional sources of food. So that is probably one of the more extreme cases that Andy is showing us there, where it almost looks to me like the Badlands of Alberta. And so that's a major, I don't know all the ins and outs of how that's going to be done, but they're going to have to level that off and return it to something productive. There won't be a bunch of bulldozers, I know that. There'll be a lot of manual labor. All right, well, thanks for that, and I will turn it over to Julie now to, I'm assuming, let me see. There we go, yeah. Thanks.
Henry's so tall. Henry's so tall, you can see him when he's standing down there. I don't feel as confident, so I'm gonna use the microphone up here. It's wonderful to be here. My name's Julie Dirksen, and I'm the Supporter Relations Manager. I live in Winnipeg. I really have the very fun job of being able to do this across the country, because we have projects, programs, and supporters from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, some in Quebec, and Atlantic Canada. So I get to visit agricultural communities, cities all over the place, and a lot of churches, which is really, really fun for me. I am originally from Saskatchewan, so my dad is a farmer, was a farmer in Swift Current area. My brother took over that farm, and my sister and her family farm in the Kindersley area of Saskatchewan. And we live in Winnipeg, but we have 15 acres in the Altona Red River Valley area, where we do 2 acres of vegetables and some other things. So I kind of live the best of both worlds a lot of the time, which is really, really neat. So it's wonderful to be here. I actually have family in Kitchener-Waterloo, so anytime I get into the area, it's a bit of an extra bonus too. So I am going to talk to you a bit about us more broadly. I might skip over some slides. I doubled up on Henry a little bit, so that's my bad. I'll quickly go through those ones. And then I'm going to talk to you about a trip I took to Kenya last year. And one of the projects we saw actually is the start of a Nature Plus project, so I can also maybe just give a bit of context to that as well. So, as many of you know, we are a member-based agency. We are kind of a bank. We have 15 members who have accounts with us that they use for their food programming. And we kind of leverage that with our ecumenical nature exposure experience, and we kind of attract the attention of additional supporters of the government to provide extra support for those food programs. So I really enjoy, I am a Mennonite. I have worked in Mennonite institutions my whole life, and I really love working for an ecumenical organization because I see the range of Christian responses to hunger and the range of what our members are doing, and our cumulative range with our partners across the world, and it's really quite something. So these are our 15 members, everything from Adventists to Mennonites to Catholics to the evangelical, to ERDO, which represents evangelical churches. We program in 3 ways: emergency food assistance, which is times of crisis; long-term responses, which are trying to allow households more resilience so that they have food longer, they have better strategies for feeding themselves, providing revenue for future years. And then we engage Canadians, like you, and governments toward meaningful change for people who are hungry. To give you a scale, emergency food assistance, when I started in 2020, about 65% of our revenue went to emergency food assistance. Those are often short-term projects, 6 months of like emergency rations to get people through really difficult times. And then about 35% were long-term responses, conservation agriculture, nutrition programs. That's kind of how the balance worked. Given some of the extreme circumstances that we have faced in the last few years, last year, the year Henry was talking about, we did 72% to emergency food assistance. And that was just because the need was great. We were called into certain areas like Somalia, where all of a sudden hunger was hitting that 4, 5, classification scale that Henry showed you. And he also gave you that slide. So this is how we get support across the country. We have growing projects about, like yours. The 140, it's hard to calculate what a growing project is because as the years go by, you all look so different. There is no standard growing project. They look very, very different. We're probably closer to 200 growing projects around Canada or across Canada. Some have 8 members. They do the harvest days of like the 15 combines. I was at one of those in Leduc last year. It's quite the sight to see when they're all lined up to harvest a quarter section. Others are 2-person growing projects where you just have a couple of neighbors who are working together. But the growing project revenue is about half of our donation revenue. The other half comes from just individuals or from, we have people, farmers, who go to the elevator and sell a load of grain at the elevator, and the elevator sends us the check. They just donate it right there. We're calling those growing partners, people who produce food and sell some of their own food but aren't connected to a community. So we have all kinds of supporters. And we have a lot of public support. So we showed you our revenue numbers, but over 2,000 Canadians responded to appeals all through donations. Over 400 sent letters and postcards to MPs asking for greater support and response to ending hunger. And then we have lots of people who participate in online meetings, webinars, things we offer as education. And we believe that all people should have regular access to enough nutritious food to lead healthy and active lives. That's kind of our standard of food security, of global food security. And I don't know if you've seen this before. This is just kind of what global hunger is doing. And the last few years have been really difficult for many people. And given what's happening in Gaza, I suspect the numbers this year will increase as well. And people are hungry because of inequality, because of conflict, like war, like Gaza, like the Ukraine. Ukraine had huge implications for food security, not necessarily in that region, but because of all the food that was supplied to the Horn of Africa from the Ukraine prior to the war. So when those shipments stopped, sourcing food in many of those areas became challenging. Inflation, all those pieces. Climate change and natural disasters, and then the food system failures that were worsened by COVID-19 that still exist. Supply chains, all those kinds of difficulties. And of course, 79% of women in least developed countries derive their income from agriculture. The women tend to be the farmers in the family, and they grow food for themselves, and they sell what extra they have. So the better that they are able to produce, the more income and revenue they have for their families. So last year I went to Kenya with Canadian Foodgrains Bank, and we saw the range. We saw the range of types of projects. We saw emergency food assistance. We saw long-term food security projects. So I'm just going to show you 3 of the site visits that we did that represent some of those projects. First thing, Kenya. I had never been before. Kenya is about 85% Christian. The church in Kenya is a powerful community development source. Like, that's how community development programs happen. Less through the government, more through the network of churches. And that's how our members operate in many of the communities that they're present in. When I was in Kenya, it was part of the drought, the hunger crisis that was hitting the Horn of Africa at the time. The worst of the drought was obviously Somalia and Ethiopia, but the northern part of Kenya, which borders Ethiopia, was really affected by that drought as well. And also, one of the problems with Kenya was not just the worst drought areas, but there was like a lack of rain. It had been the 3rd failed rainy season when I was there. They were anticipating the 4th in the southern part of Kenya. In the northern part, we saw kids who were 4 years old and hadn't experienced rain. When we were there, it rained for the first time, and it was the first time that they had actually experienced rain. They were very excited. So the first set of projects, this is a project in Makindu, which is south of Nairobi. And this is what I mean by churches kind of as community development and training vehicles. So this is through Tier Fund Canada, and their member in Makindu, they have a farmer school. So what they do is they work with churches in the area. So churches within a 100-kilometer radius, they will send 3 people to the school, and it's education, agriculture education at the school. But they're being trained to train their communities. So they go through this training course over a year, then they go home, and then they do the same thing in their regions. And it's all through the churches in the regions that this education happens. So this was a classroom. This was the day a month that they came in to Makindu, and they had a day workshop. So we met the folks there. And it was about increasing the ability of people to produce food for themselves in their communities and their households as a way of improving long-term food security. So that was through a Tier Fund partner. In this same area, I'm showing you this. This is our group, so it's not, but we were looking at a water source. So one of the challenges of Kenya is water. And water is, as we all know, directly connected to food, right? If I'm from Southwest Saskatchewan, we're on our 3rd year of drought. Production is not looking so good in these last few years. The 4 bushels an acre that Henry talked about was Medicine Hat, which is about a 2-hour drive from where I grew up. So this is a well that serves communities because it's not dug wells, like they don't have a water supply in the same way. So these are rivers, streams. This is what seems to be a dry river, but what the community's doing is they're just digging till they hit the water line, right? So it's kind of deep holes that they're digging until you can see the water come. And then they're carrying that water back. So we saw a lot of dry streams with very deep wells as people attempted to find the water table. And yeah, so that was in an area, it's lush there right around the riverbed, but if you look further back, you can see it doesn't quite look so green. And these are some of the challenges facing. Now this is also where the Nature Plus project is that Henry was talking about. So in this area, in Kenya, because water is a challenge, the mountains are the top growing places, right? Because that's where you have water. Now, as there have been droughts, people have moved farming illegally up mountains because that's where they can grow food. So they kind of illegally settled crown land in these mountain areas. As they plow that land and farm it, it increases the risks of when you do get major rains, flooding down below. So it's kind of a chain reaction, right? Because we also don't get regular steady rain. You'll have an extreme rain event where it just washes down and then you get damage attached to that. So the project is actually to move the people off the mountain, to find resources and to improve their farming situations off the mountaintop, and then to reforest the mountaintop to minimize the impact to the farmers in their land at the bottom of the mountain. So that's kind of how the Nature Plus works. It improves the food security for all by allowing those systems to not be in crisis. Now this is a micro-lending program, and this is also what Tier Fund does in Makindu. So it's a range of things, and it was mostly women, although there were some men at this. And so it's a self-governing program. This one was actually independent now. It had been started by Tier Fund with kind of money to start, and then it actually became that they had enough assets and resources to manage the micro-lending program. So everybody goes through, they get what they need for their business, and they pay back what they need so that they can increase their household food security, that they have other sources of revenue. Sometimes it's a farming business that they're expanding, or they're getting equipment for. They're using the money to buy equipment to kind of secure their farming business, or other things. Embu is a different area, and this was more on the agricultural side, and I have to confess I'm a bit of a permaculture kind of geek. I like the ideas of using different things to grow different things, and these were projects where mostly women. It was a women farming school where they were taught how to maximize the production on their acre of land. So most of them had an acre, and they grew maize, which is the kind of main sustenance. It creates a starchy food. That's kind of the staple of every meal. And then beans and squash, right? It's those kinds of three combinations growing together, using the mulch from one to cover the rest. And it was women training each other and eventually helping with labor. So they would also help with labor on these projects. I always liked the mulch because I hate working with corn mulch. And there was corn mulch all over the place, and it takes forever for corn mulch to actually, move into the soil. So, but it was fascinating because there was a lot of corn mulch, and yet you would see the legumes and the squash just kind of coming up from underneath it. This is a woman who was a participant in a livestock project, because those are the other types of project. So she was actually widowed, living with her kids, which is a very vulnerable position for an older woman in Kenya to be in, because you just have no resources. You are dependent on your daughter and her husbands and their family to care for you, and you are a drain on their resources if those resources are finite, right? Like if you're stressed, you're the drain on those resources. So she actually ended up in the livestock program, so she's raising goats right now. And so they gave her a breed of goat that is a high-producing milk breed, and she is actually, she has 3 now. So she started with 1, 2, 3, and then she is selling the milk, and the family's farm, which has like rabbits and other things, they're supplying kind of the fertilizer that she needs to do some, and the goats are providing the fertilizer for her garden, for their garden, and the waste is food for her goats. So, so she then is a provider to the house, not just a drain on the household well-being. And for older women in particular, or widowed women, it can be a difficult thing to find a place for yourself. Marsabit. Now Marsabit is northern Kenya. It was about 200 kilometers from the Ethiopian border, and this was the area that they had not seen rain in 4 years. So it was dry. Now it is a Maasai community, so they're not like planters. There's never really a lot of strong agriculture, like growing agriculture. It is a livestock culture. And they would have goats and camels. And pre-drought, a household might have 1,500 goats and 300 camels. Like, they're not poor farmers, they're very lucrative in terms of the size of their flocks, right, of their animals. And then they're not sedentary, they would move with those animals. Well, most of the places we saw, there were maybe 15, 20 goats left for a household, and maybe 1 or 2 camels. We saw camel carcasses all over the place. And of course, if you're a farming family, you know the kind of psychological impact of a vocational way of life that you see ending. So as people got to their last animals, not knowing what to do with their families, not knowing what that means for their families, I guess I was struck by the emotional toll that you could see. Like, it's the survival toll, but it's like, who are we if we're not if we're not these livestock gatherers? This is who we are as a people. This is who my father was, my grandfather was. That kind of loss of a way of life was really stunning to me when I visited them. But we were doing an emergency food assistance program here, where they get a certain number of, it's all organized through the partner and the local municipal government. So families are identified who are at risk, they have to register, they are given a card, which gives them the rations that they receive. And this is a physical ration distribution. Sometimes we do emergency food assistance through an e-cash or other things where they can buy it locally, but in this area that didn't work. And so then we set up the distribution, and they would come and they would pick up their food based on what their card said they were eligible for. And it was maize, oil, salt, and then there was, if you were a nursing mother, pregnant, or had kids, you could get like a high formula, like a high nutritional formula for a supplement. This project had been, it was an extension of a project that had been running for 6 months. And of course, there was no rain, the situation was worse, so they extended the project for another 3 months. This was month 2 of month 3. But you can also see the anxiety, like at the end of 3 months, there's not a question for what happens if the situation doesn't change. Like you have to then find somebody willing to come in, able to come in, or has the resources to make this project happen. So I think for lots of people, they're grateful, but they understand that it's a month or 2 or 3. And if you can't see your situation changing in that period of time, that can be a little overwhelming. This just struck me because it was like 35 degrees, and I come from southern Saskatchewan. I'm used to no trees and a lot of empty, open, grassy spaces, but everybody was waiting. So, you know, we started the distribution, everybody would come, and there were just communities settled under these trees of shade in different parts. But it also gives you an idea of how dry the landscape was. And that's the card. So that's kind of the card the Essa family have. They collect it when they get to the distribution, then they take it, and they give it to the giver, and then they take their emergency ration back. So that was a bit about Kenya. These are just some final slides. We invite Canadians, as Henry's probably mentioned before, to give, to pray, to learn, and to advocate. And we often continue to call on the Government of Canada to increase the levels of official development assistance to help end hunger. So we encourage people to write letters, to talk to their MPs encouraging that. Every time there's a change of government, we get a little nervous because you're negotiating with somebody else who has different interests. But we do think this is an important thing for the Government of Canada to be participating in, and we continue to think it's an important thing for us as a country to participate in. You know, I was struck in Kenya because, you know, I grew up in the era of like egg extension workers being Government of Canada workers. So, you know, like that's who did extension work. And I know now in the Curtis it's different. A lot of the extension work is corporate guys who do the extension work, or you hire agronomists to come on. In Kenya, very few extension work is done by government agronomists. Most of it is done by international development agencies. They are providing a lot of the extension work to support local farmers to be able to increase their ability to grow food for themselves and to be successful at farming. So the letter builder is still active with that QR code, Henry?
I don't know what the QR code is, but the letter builder.
Okay, the letter builders, so our website, if you're interested in sending a letter, you can totally do that. And that's it for me. I'll go back. Any questions? Sorry, I probably just shot a lot out at you. I apologize. And if you decide your questions later, you can ask, you can email, you can call, that's no problem.
Are there any questions now? Very good. Thanks, Julie. So one of the things that we offer as part of the last part that Julie talked about there, which is getting engagement from Canadians to support our efforts and make the government aware of what we're doing, is we have an event called Hunger on the Hill, which is just coming up now. There's a young person's edition of Hunger on the Hill coming up the end of April, the first day of May. But we also have Hunger on the Hill events for people of any age that happen in October. And what that involves is people will get some training online. Our Foodgrains folks in Winnipeg do some online training with people about some of the issues that we're facing, some of the things that we're asking the government of as well. And then there will be some further training when people actually gather together in Ottawa about these issues. And the whole purpose of this is that if we have about 25 people They are broken up into groups of about 3 or 4, and there are meetings set up with MPs. So these groups of 3 or 4 people meet with an MP, often their assistant is with them, and just talk about what they've learned and talk about the importance of hunger and how we address that and what some of our asks may be. And that has had a dramatic effect on our relationship with the government, a really good effect on our relationship with the government, but it has also led to some policy things that have resulted in things like the $35.5 million that we have gotten from Global Affairs Canada. There was a big push on a number of years ago for climate-assisted funding, and that was a package that came together largely because of some of the things that we were saying and other agencies were saying as well. So that's something that you can get involved with if you're interested in. If you're getting my newsletter, that'll be updated in that. It'll be in our publications as well when those dates are, but I know there's another event coming up in October. The other thing that we do to engage Canadians is learning tours. And learning tours are events where Canadians are invited to go on a trip to overseas countries, and rather than me standing here and explaining that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill, who has been on a learning tour very recently, and give us a few feelings for what went on with your learning tour.
Thank you, Henry. I'll have to figure out which, okay, we got it. So as Henry mentioned, there are opportunities for people to apply and be selected to go on various learning tours. Foodgrains, they usually have a couple of tours a year. They were suspended during COVID, so actually the Malawi learning tour was the first one post-COVID. So a call went out in September to anybody who was on the newsletter list and asking who might be interested in participating. You had to apply, you went through an interview process, and 10 people were selected, and fortunately I was one of those 10. So I'll just quickly go through some of the things that I did learn while I was there. And this is sort of précis. I have given presentations ranging from 30 minutes up to an hour. It won't be that long.
We'll be on our way to
Yeah, I know that. So as I mentioned, organized by the Canadian Foodgrains Bank, and this was the first tour since the pandemic. 2 weeks in duration, maximum 10 participants, and the key is it's self-funding. We didn't use your donation dollars to fund our trip. We had to look after that ourselves. I think that's very important. Objectives really to gain an appreciation for the challenges faced by residents in Malawi and observe the impact that the Foodgrains Bank funding has in that particular country. I have to admit, when the call came out, I had to Google where Malawi was. That's how little I knew about that country. So it's in the southeast corner of Africa, not very far from Kenya. So a lot of the same things that Julie observed, I also observed in Malawi. The economy, it ranks 33rd in terms of all the African countries. The GDP per capita, $300. Most economically sustainable country is Egypt. That's number one, and it has a GDP of 15% of what Egypt has. Half the population is below the poverty line. The poverty line, $2 a day. And most of the poverty is in the rural area of Malawi. 80% of the population in rural areas. Really lacking infrastructure. The roads, we drove on roads, I think the last time they saw any type of grader was when the roads were built. And when they have rain, those roads become impassable. No electricity to speak of. Some of the houses had solar, that was really the only source of electricity, and really very little, if any, services. The kwacha is the currency of Malawi, and it was devalued 44% in November. We were there in November. The 2 weeks we were there, it was devalued twice. And they have to import most of their goods. Any manufactured goods they have to import. So every time the kwacha is devalued, it costs more to bring goods in. And on top of all that, the government is said to be corrupt. So I visited 3 types of projects. The first one was providing nutrition to infants. And we visited a nursery. This was a tough one to start with because it was a nursery for children, infants with special needs. And mothers would bring their infants for physical and cognitive therapy, as well as nutrition. And we met one woman. She walked 5 hours to get to that nursery with her infant on her back, and it was just unbelievable. So here you can see on the left-hand side, they're weighing the infant, and then on the right hand, they're measuring around the upper arm, and that's to determine if they're growing at the expected rate. If they weren't, then we provided funding through the Foodgrains, provided infant supplement that they would take home. So they would receive enough supplement for 2 weeks that they could feed to the infant and hopefully increase their growth rate. The next type of project, and Julie actually talked about it, and that's the conservation agriculture, trying to improve the growing practices. Here you can see a field in the background of rice straw that's there to preserve the moisture. Henry talked about the husband and wife aren't necessarily an equal team. That was one of the things that the organizations that were delivering these projects, they were really emphasizing. And they promoted the fact that any time there was any discussion about farming, they wanted both husband and wife there. So in this case, they both talked about the project and the impact that it was having on their production. Corn residue, that's certainly used as well. This is the traditional way of farming, and yes, the women are usually the ones who are out there. You can see in the background there's a field that's already been hand cultivated or hand hoed, and very little residue there. So that's the traditional way of growing. The other thing we found, there were a number of areas where the crop residue was burned off. And some of you that are old enough would remember that was a practice in Ontario, because you want to get rid of the nuisance of having the residue on, and that's still going on in Malawi. So we were promoting conservation agriculture. There were some farmers that talked about a fourfold increase in their yields because of the conservation methods. One of the challenges with the crop residue is the free-range goats. They wander all over the place, and you know, when we were driving down the road, you had to dodge both the chickens and the goats. The final project we visited was distributing relief funds from the impacts of Cyclone Freddy. Cyclone Freddy hit the southern part of Malawi in March of last year. And March was about the time that a lot of the crops were getting ready to be harvested, and they were wiped out. So The Foodgrains funds provided relief so that they could buy food. And then the final payment, which is what we're giving here, was to buy seed and other supplies for the coming crop year. This is a photo op. Just I didn't hand out all the money, but there were 450 families there that day to receive their final payments, and it amounted to about $77 Canadian. But to them, that was a godsend. This is a house that got hit by the cyclone. One of the opportunities that we had when we were in Malawi was a homestay. So we would stay with a family during the day and overnight. This was the house that the family I stayed with, it was hit by Cyclone Freddy. They had built a temporary structure that we were able to sleep in on the ground, I might add. That was certainly an important part of our learning experience. This is my host, William. They called us William Squared because that's my name as well. And you can see some of the houses in the back that have already been rebuilt. And the red brick or the clay brick is very common in Malawi. That's the main building structure. So what did I learn? First of all, we don't know poverty. You know, I was interested in your 3 levels of poverty, and you know, they go without food sometimes for at least a day or more. They try to feed their children first. Usually the mother is the last person to get fed. And it really is a hand-to-mouth existence. But they're resilient people. They're accepting of their situation. They're very reliant on family, and there's still a tribal system there, not on government. Government does not provide any support or very little support. And they're very appreciative of the support that are being provided by the Foodgrains Bank as well as other NGOs. Henry told the story of Mother Teresa and the One, and I tell a story about the starfish, where someone was walking along the beach and noticed thousands of starfish that had been washed up. And there was this one gentleman who was walking along, and he was throwing them back in. And he walked up and he said, why are you doing that? There's no way you can throw all these back. And he threw one in, he said, well, it meant a lot to that one. And so that's what you have to think about when you are working with a country like Malawi, that we can't fix everything, but boy, we can sure do something, and it is so much appreciated by the people. The other learning that, and this was sort of the main reason that I went to Malawi, was to see how our money was being spent, and I did find out that it is being put to very good use. We work through on the ground NGOs, aid agencies. They hire local people who know the traditions, the values, and so on, and they were very effective. The local relief agencies are critical. There's no question about it, because, as I said, government is not providing the kind of assistance or assistance that you might find here with Foodgrain or with food banks and so on. I didn't see an easy way out of poverty. You know, it's often said that education is so important to lift a country or a community out of poverty, and that's one of the challenges there. The primary school is funded up to grade 8, but from grade 9 on, families have to pay to send their kids to school. An interesting statistic when I was there, they said that if you take 50 boys who graduate from grade 8, 15 will go on to grade 9. Out of 50 women, 5 will go on to grade 9. So the lack of education really does have an impact. The one thing that, the one word we learned in Malawi was zikomo. Zikomo is thank you. And we heard that quite often when we visited the various villages. And it really was heartwarming when you met with the villages. They would show up, 200-300 people would show up when we drive into a village to visit the projects, and they were singing and dancing, and it really was heartwarming. I'll finish by saying that I was involved, as I mentioned earlier, I've been involved with Foodgrains projects for 25 years. Barb and Tom Parker, I don't know where Tom went, but he's looking after the grandson right now. They have been involved in the same number of years and providing great leadership. So as I mentioned before, I went to Malawi to see how our money was being spent, and I was very pleased that it was being spent very effectively and for the right reasons. Great. Zikomo.
Any questions for Bill?
I should mention that this was just a thumbnail sketch of my presentation, and I presented to some church clients. I have a couple lined up in the next month, and so if any of you are interested, I can provide. I can give a presentation from 10 minutes to an hour.
No, that's great to hear those stories, Bill. I went to Malawi in 2018. That was my first experience as well on a learning tour. Prior to actually being an employee at the Foodgrains Bank, I was growing project leader at that time, and you brought back some very familiar territory, some very familiar memories. You talked about people greeting you and dancing and singing. It was something that just absolutely amazed me about the people in Malawi, is how they can. I like the message that I give when I'm talking, especially. They have so very little, and yet they're so very happy. It's unbelievable. All the things that we have and the difficulties we have, and yet those people don't have enough food. They're in communities that don't have all the stuff that we have, and yet they're so very happy. And it really, really was. It's like a first love. You never forget that kind of a trip, and it has certainly made an impression on me as well. So thanks for sharing that. We much appreciate that. Yeah.
I attended Rome in 2006, and your presentation,
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. Everywhere you go, there's a brick kiln somewhere, and they're making bricks right there. Just that's what they do. So. Okay, if there any questions on anything that we've talked about, or anything related to Foodgrains Bank at all, at this point, I'd like to get Growing Projects to talk a little bit about what they do. I know, Barb, can you take a couple of minutes and just tell us about because we call it, is that what you still call it?
Yeah, we still call it Bushels for Change, but when the Foodgrains project becomes the mantra, I guess. We don't have access to additional land in this area that we can actually grow a crop on. So we had the idea to have work by donations, and we have a fund growing project giant pumpkins, tallest sunflower, biggest zucchini. Murray here is our champion zucchini. Probably 5 years out of the 6 we've been doing it. And we have a wrap up and we have a meal and people just come and enjoy and donate. And what we started in the last year was called our harvest table. So if people had surplus produce in their garden or orchard or from the side roads of the concessions with the wild apples this year, made applesauce, relish, just fresh produce, and people from the congregations brought it and donated if they were able, and the surplus was sent to the Royal City Mission in Guelph through Heather and John Leffler. They delivered it there, so it all went to good use, and we're doing the same this year. We're going to actually hope we can do a bit of gleaning of the leeks and wild fiddleheads and have that available. And we're offering seeds. It's the year of the squash, so I have free seeds, sunflowers, free sunflower pumpkins, zucchini. I have them here if anybody wants to take any home. And also beans and squash, carrots, beets, any seeds, and then it comes back as produce and goes to help us raise funds as part of our donations. And we're small, but it's like the loaves and fishes. Somehow we've been able to donate between 7,000 to 9,000 over the last 5 to 6 years. So it's quite a lot of fun. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. I've been to a couple of your celebrations. It is a lot of fun. And I don't know how far you're going, but they have the biggest pumpkin contest and the ugliest pumpkin and the smallest pumpkin and yeah. So there's a lot of, and then sunflowers. And are you still doing sunflowers?
Sunflowers and zucchini.
And zucchini, yeah. So lots of neat opportunities. And those seeds that you're being given, you're challenged to use those to grow the biggest pumpkin, the biggest zucchini. So
you don't want to leave your car unlocked because there'll be a zucchini on your seat.
Oh. You didn't hear that. He just said, don't leave your car unlocked when you're at the celebration because there'll be a zucchini on your seat. Does that mean they're hard to get rid of? Anyway, it's certainly a lot of fun that you have here. So, is there anybody else here associated with a growing project or that would like to say a few words? All right. Well, I thank you for your time today. It's been wonderful spending time with you, and I hope that you've learned a little bit about Foodgrains Bank. We've had some excellent speakers, Julie and Bill. Thank you so much for enlightening us on some of the things that that we don't see every day, because you're here doing your thing, but the thing that you're doing is letting us do those things that they showed you today. So thank you very much for that. We have, I guess, Barb, refreshments or...
Yeah, coffee, tea, juice, muffins, croissants, cheese and crackers, whatever. Please help yourself. One morning, I didn't pay attention, I picked out the cheese, and there's some jalapeno in it. So. Noted that on the plate. So.
All right, well, before we, and I will add too, that we have tickets in there, we have strays in there. If you're wanting to purchase some, please come and what we got for time? Oh, great, we've got a half an hour. That's great. We've done really, really well, so thank you. So before we do that, let's close off with a word of prayer, and then we'll enjoy ourselves together in the back room there. Lord God, it is so good to get together with your people, and so good to hear the stories of the work that is being done by Canadian Foodgrains Bank, and we are so grateful to the people that are here today that help support this work. Lord, we ask that through all the difficult situations in the world, whether it be Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Yemen, all those countries where conflict is taking place, that your hand and your presence will be in those situations. We know that everything happens in this world, that you are aware of it, and that if for some reason it is happening, and you will see the good out of it. We don't see that, but Lord, everything is in your hands, and we trust you for that. We also trust you, Lord, that the work that's being done here in this congregation and in this community and throughout the various growing projects across Canada will be fruitful, and that we will see returns that will bless the work that we're doing, and that we can continue to help more people around the world. So we ask your blessing on all of these projects and all of this work, that we may continue to see those children of yours, those faces of yours bring that smile because of the help that they're getting. Lord, I thank you for everybody that's here, and as we leave from this place and enjoy our food, we ask that you bless this food that's been provided for us, and we ask that you return us all safely to our next destinations, to our families, to our homes, to our meetings, wherever we may be going. We ask that you be with us and guide us there safely. We ask this all in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.